ref. That she got the ball. Good day, my fellow European semi-finalists. How we all keeping? We're back here for yet another game as Tottenham's heroes return on home soil as we take on Nottingham Forest as we face former manager Nuno Espirito Santo. Of course, Forest are in that run for Champions League, so they are going to give us a good game tonight. They are on form. And look, when it comes to Tottenham's point of view, it's really difficult to see, know what performance to really expect tonight, which, we'll get on to in a minute because, I was listening to Amram after the United defeat to Wolves, and they sort of said, look, is this the way it's going to be in the Premier League between now and the end of the season? He sort of said, yeah, all of our eggs are in the European basket. I just wonder, are we expected to maybe see something similar between now and the end of the Premier League? But we're in the European semi-final. Of course, we've got Bodo Glimt. Let's go around the houses and find out how everyone's feeling about that draw. Jack, Bodo Glimt, you happy with that?
Very happy with it. It's a bit of a hipster team to come up against as well, which we'll be looking forward to doing some research on. When we did the Twitter Reacts, we saw a bunch of cool facts about the club and about the journey that the away fans will have to go through. I think I'm also pretty relieved that it won't be too crazy in terms of the weather when we get up there. I was just speaking to Kaylee Davis this morning over a nice coffee, and she was saying it's only about 45 degrees or something like that in up in Bodo. So that's probably a big relief for us, knowing that it should be on other nights, a very, very difficult place to go to. And it just feels good to be in a semifinal. Once again, that's 2 times now this season, Dave. But, I spoke to Soren, I think before that, something about maybe the younger generation like myself. I think the Europa League just has a bit more glamour, a bit more glitz to it. And just to be in a semifinal of the Europa League just feels like where Tottenham Hotspur is supposed to be. Feels like, we're in the right place, the right time, and in the right mood. I'm happy clapping until May 1st. Then, the stress and all the anxiety will come back again. I'm just looking forward to seeing Spurs hopefully pick up a win, at least put in some type of decent performance to, just ride the vibes and ride the high. But feeling good, Dave, feeling good about being a European semifinalist, just feeling good about Tottenham Hotspur at the moment. And in terms of the opponent, I think we always knew it was going to be a tough team, usually picking between semifinalists. Any of them are going to be good, but perhaps Bodo Glimt might be technically the easiest of them.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm cautious about saying that, but, you look at
danger word.
You usually expect Tottenham, to win in Europe. AZ Alkmaar, we were expecting to win away from home, weren't we? And, we found it difficult that night. So I'm very hesitant to say it's the easiest. I do believe, I do think they deserve to be there, obviously, by the run they've had, just like we deserve to be there. But what I will say is, this year, without the Champions League teams dropping down, I do think it's Tottenham's best ever chance to get their hands on a European trophy in my lifetime anyway. I think it's favourable, especially for us to be able to get to the final. Whether we're going to cart ADM, which is seized today, I'm not quite so sure, but let's wait and see. But Dermo and Steve, my man, you were doing a watch along together for the quarterfinals. How did you feel when you found out Bodo Glimt were our semi-finalist opponents?
I was over the moon. I'll let Steve go first. Go on, you go first, Steve. Go on.
No, go ahead, Dermot, man. It's all you. It's all you.
I was over the moon. I was absolutely. I didn't want that to go. Though to reach the 72 UEFA Cup final, we did beat an Italian side. We beat Milan to reach that final. So I'm always looking at omens. But look, I think it's a good tie. It's not going to be as easy as everyone thinks it is, especially going there. If we win 1-0, other teams, look, Lazio lost 2-0 there. So they are capable of pulling off good results. But yeah, I prefer this one. And we are going to the final. We're there on the 20, I don't know what date the final is. We're going to be there. We're going to lift the trophy. We're going to bring it home to White Hart Lane. And we're going to stick 2 fingers up to them arse a lot and say, we know how to win trophies. You're still bottlers. Come on, you Spurs.
Well, they're also in the European semi-final. Hopefully PSG can deal with them. Yeah. But Steve, what were your thoughts when we got Bodo Glimt?
I was a little apprehensive, if I'm being perfectly honest, because being vaguely familiar with the with the league that they play in and the atmospheres in which they play in, and especially their European run. This is a team that doesn't care where they play, who's standing in front of them. They're going to play a hard 90 regardless of who's standing at it. And in order for you to get past them, you're going to have to play perfectly or damn near perfectly in order to put up a solid result. And so from that standpoint, a part of me kind of wishes it was Lazio. But that being said, if Spurs are really to hoist the European trophy, beating a team like Bodo Glimt right before they get to Bilbao is going to do wonders for their confidence. 100%.
No, look, 100%. Look, it's not going to be easy. There is a good togetherness with them, and that can bring you a long way. Sometimes that can equal, if you don't have a togetherness, but you're just relying on quality, sometimes that can match that, or if not be better than that. So what I will say is we can't take it for granted. We do have to go in there, and act like they're, to a degree, a big team, not take them for granted and be well up for it. I do fear that plastic pitch away from home. I keep referencing young boys back in 2011 in from training. We were 3-0 down at halftime on their plastic pitch. I know we end up losing 3-2, but I do think this is one where we will have to rely on the home game, try and do our business, because we are playing home first. I don't want to leave it in the balance going out there away from home. I think, look, last week, everything was telling us it can't be done. I know we got the job done, but I really don't want to chance it, leaving it for the away leg. Yeah, again. But Soren, what was your feelings when we got Bodo Glimt? Or did you even care? Did you just, it doesn't matter who the opponents are, you think we're going to win anyway?
Looking on the quarterfinals, we were going all the way. And I don't know what it is with this year. I don't know why, but I just see our name written on it. And look, whoever's in front of us, we've got to beat. It doesn't matter who it is. So it's, Lazio, that's a tie, that to me is a final. It's not the semi-final when you've got 4 teams still in it. So I think we, like you say, we need to do it at home. We need to make sure we've, probably two clear goals this time rather than a draw, or certainly going there with the lead. And I just see it as our year. I really do.
And you've been consistent about that all this Europa League campaign, to be fair.
Yeah. I just think it's, and you know what? I think as put it more into concrete is the fact that we are doing so shit in the league means we've got to actually, for once, put everything into this competition. Because look, we've seen in the past under previous managers in Europe where we haven't necessarily played our strongest team, and we've suffered. Not tonight, sorry, but this season, it's like that's all that's left. We have to chuck everything into this game. So I don't see. I just see us in the final. I just know we're going to Bilbao, full stop. And that's it's written in the stars, full stop.
Do you know what? I really hope we are, because that Spurs are on their way to Bilbao would be going everywhere, and I'd love to see it. I've seen a clip on Twitter the other day, in the Croatian league, a game between 2 Croatian teams, and they're in the stands seeing the Spurs get battered everywhere they go. I mean, I just love to hoist this Europa League Cup, and absolutely shut everyone up. It'll be absolutely brilliant. But look, let's move on to tonight. I mean, Dermo, will start with you. After a morale boost and 1-0 victory over Eintracht Frankfurt in the Europa League, Postecoglou emphasised the importance of squad unity and the positive atmosphere within the camp. Can this be the galvanising victory that the squad and the management needed to sort of kick on? And can Spurs carry this momentum into today's fixture against Nottingham Forest tonight and finish out the season strong? Or do you think we can expect maybe what United are going through, where they're sort of beating off the Premier League campaign, they're safe now and they're just concentrating on Europe?
No, I mean, tonight, as it says in the chat, and I knew anyway, that we'll go 13th tonight if we win tonight. We got a load of places. I think we've got to end the season strong. We've got to take every game strongly. It doesn't matter who it's against. I think getting to a semi-final should give us a major bounce of confidence that we can go out and beat anyone. If we can go out and put in the performance in Germany against Frankfurt and that intimidating atmosphere, then we should be able to go anywhere and get results. That shows how good this team is. When that team is, and that proves that the team are together, they're together with the manager, everyone is a one. And with the season we've had, I just want to finish the season as strongly as possible, take that confidence into pre-season, and then take that confidence into start of next season. It's so vitally important, because if you go in, if you just say forget the Premier League like Man United and only concentrate in Europe, you're not building confidence. You're up and down, and that zap confidence. I think we've got to win tonight. A win tonight will continue that momentum. Football's all about momentum, gaining more confidence. And when we get to that semi-final, the players are going to be so confident, think, okay, we can win this. And we've got to have that attitude. That's what Ange's attitude is. We can win this. And I think it's vitally important we have a good end to the season. If we can go the last 6 games unbeaten, plus win the UEFA Cup, how much we can take that into next season is unreal. You know, it's going to be unreal, and that's what we need. And then we can start next season with a big bounce, with the Super Cup final, and on we go. We got to, and I am so optimistic that we are going to end the season high. I've said it a few times. We got to end the season on a high. Give us something to cling on to, and if Ange is there or not, it doesn't matter. The players have to owe it to us to put in a performance for the rest of the season and give us something back. We've given them everything we've got. We just want something back from them.
No, 100%. Look, I don't like the mentality that, you know, we're just going to ditch the Premier League. I think, you know, if Postecoglou, say, for instance, and it's a big if still, you know, wins the Europa League, I think if we're not winning these or, you know, making a good attempt at trying to win these last few games, I still think it leaves the question open. Is he the right man going forward? Whereas I think if he can pick up results in these last few games while also winning Europa League, I think then maybe the narrative maybe starts to shift a little bit in his favor. So I do think on that perception, I think it's very, very important, you know, that we try and win these games. And look, Postecoglou also said it in his pre-match press conference that, you know, he wants to try and win these games now. You know, I know that his main priority is Europe, but, you know, he says there's no better preparation for Europe than winning, you know, so that's the name of the game tonight. And I just don't want to get caught into the trap that we've made rotations, he's throwing the game. That's not the case. We should have a good enough squad to be able to make rotations and still go out there and be competitive. I just worry that over the years at Tottenham Hotspur, as soon as manager makes changes, all of a sudden we go, he's throwing the game, we don't care about this, we've lost it, this, that, and the other. But I think that's the wrong attitude. I think that then stinks of your recruitment. I think that's where you have to go after recruitment. At the end of the day, there's so many games in football now. There's more games than ever before. You need a bigger squad. You need a full squad with competitive players. So if he makes changes, I think it's a golden opportunity for players to come in and say, look, Ange, put me in that semi-final, you know. And I hope them players take that attitude, because if them players are going out there taking their foot off the gas, well, then, you know, they shouldn't be here next season if they're not motivated by a semi-final and trying to get in that starting lineup. Steve, we'll come to you. What's your thoughts on that? And then I want to go to Søren about maybe what sort of atmosphere to expect tonight.
I'm not looking towards the end of the season. I'm just looking strictly to tonight's match against Nottingham Forest, because please believe Nottingham Forest are playing for a Champions League spot. They're going to be ready to show up today. You know, you don't think Anthony Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi, and Morgan Gibbs-White are looking to tear apart that back four? There has to be, you know, to me, it's like, that's why I didn't want to see heavy rotation today, because we didn't have a European fixture midweek. We have a big enough break before Liverpool where we actually could have carried over that momentum from Thursday. And you don't think that those guys were looking to take the pitch again? I mean, after that total team win on Thursday, and that's my biggest fear, is that with a heavy rotation, you're kind of going to lose some of that coming into today. I just thought this was an opportunity to continue over that momentum and that continuity that was built on Thursday. And it was a really good opportunity for a guy like Tom Staley to potentially build off of that penalty on Thursday. But it's also another opportunity for that front three to continue to gel, because I don't know how you guys felt about Thursday. I actually thought our attack was probably the weaker of the two. So I just thought this would have been a very good opportunity. Now, if Ange decides to heavily rotate, okay, fine, it's going to be next man up, and there should be that belief in that next man up. But me personally, I just thought without the European fixture midweek, that you were going to be able to carry over with the bulk of that starting 11 on Thursday and still be able to rotate against Liverpool moving into that first fixture.
Look, you know, speaking of rotation, you know, he did say he's going to make 5 to 6 changes today, so it'll be interesting to see what players, Steve.
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan. Look, I can understand it. I think, you know, it's one of them. I think if there's any players that are tired, or if there's anyone carrying a knock, I don't think there's any risk. There's no need to put them out there and risk them, because if you're tired, you are more susceptible to injury as well. So I can understand it from that point of view. But what we can't do is just go, you're fine, but we're going to wrap you in cotton wool. I do agree with you on that. You know, if they're fine to play, put them out there at the end of the day. I definitely agree with that for sure. Woodsy Talks Football says, big up the panel. Spurs made me eat my words Thursday, and we were solid away. Hope we don't make too many changes to keep momentum. Another 1-0, please. Yeah, look, Woodsy, I think, you know, Ange Postecoglou, I think he deserves a a lot of credit for maybe doing. Look, you can all, of course, make the argument, oh, why is it took so long for him to make such an obvious change? But at the end of the day, you know, it seems like maybe he's starting to listen. I do think he wants to hang on to his job. That's probably why he done it as well. And look, it got us over the line at the end of the day. And look, I think, you know, a happy medium. You're not asking him to do it all the time, but if there's a case where the game is in the balance in a big game like that, do that, you know, sit in, protect it a little bit, you know. So yeah, look, hopefully we see more of that going forward. That is something we're going to get onto, you know. We're going to talk about that defensive solidity, and is that something we can see going forward? Because look, I'd also argue, I think it helps having your best backline available to you as well. You know, the likes of your Romero and Van de Ven, when you've had others there, yeah, we've praised them for filling in, doing the job. But realistically, when, you know, you look at Romero's outball the other day over the top from Maddison for the penalty, anyone that's watched the predicted lineup, how many times have I mentioned that this season? That we need to get back to that, to have that unpredictability, so that if they do want to press us, no problem, pop it in behind, good night. You know, and that's exactly what happened against Frankfurt, you know, and that's something that Toby used to give us. So I actually think, I'm going to save it, but I think Van de Ven and Romero, you know, I do think they have the potential of being a Toby and Jan. I look at Romero and Alderweireld, you know, good defenders, very good on the ball. And I look at Van de Ven and Jan Vertonghen, and both of them were long leggy, you know, and you know, decent runners. So, you know, I sort of look at it, but, you know, we'll get on to that in just a bit, Woodsy. But look, hopefully we can continue that momentum, build on the feel-good factor, you know, to a degree, some of the goodwill back towards them. It's up to them now to take that and run with it, Woodsy. Big yourself up, my man. Really appreciate the support, buddy. And big up Faz Radford as well. Hopefully you're keeping well, lad. And Scotty Hynam's there sneaking in here as well. Good to see you. But sorry, I want to come to you about the atmosphere. Look, given the turbulent season that's been marked by 21 losses, I know we're in a European semi-final, but you can't just brush that under a carpet. There's been significant protests against the ownership and widespread calls for Postecoglou's dismissal prior to the Frankfurt game. How do you anticipate the atmosphere at the stadium tonight? With Spurs now reaching a European semi-final, is there potential for unity amongst the fans to support the manager and the team in pursuit of European success? Or do you believe that the underlying tensions and frustrations will continue to maybe influence the atmosphere like we've seen at times this season?
I think tonight's atmosphere is going to be decent. I think to start with, the fans will be quite jovial. There's a little bit of a buzz going round. But look, let's not pretend if we do rotate quite a few players, if we do rotate a few players and things start to go wrong, then the crowd's going to turn, I think. I think...
You don't think there will be new happy clappers in the stadium tonight, Soren? Some converted ones?
I think a lot of the people that'll be there are the normal people, you know. Don't get me wrong, you know, like I say, to start with, and depending how the game goes, I think will dictate how the crowd goes. I know it's quite an obvious statement, but, you know, it's one of those that I just think it could be quite jovial. It could be quite good to start with. There could be a real good atmosphere. If we score early, if we're holding it, if we're playing well, the fans will just stay behind them. If we're 1-0, 2-0 down by halftime, the crowd could just turn, as you know, you'll get your Levy out chance and things like that. But I think it really does depend how the team come out tonight. I see those. Pardon?
Let me ask you. Say if we weren't to win today, do you think that feel-good factor just automatically goes again? Because I do think that's a possibility, you know, because I do think fans are fed up with losing games. It's clear, you know, you look across social media, we don't want to be throwing games, and nor should we be in that mindset, you know, as a football club. If we want to compete, we shouldn't be in the mindset of picking and choosing competitions. We should be looking to compete on all fronts. So say if the result doesn't go the right way tonight, do you think all that feel-good factor would be sucked out again?
Because, I mean, when you look at leading up to the semis, to the quarterfinals, we didn't exactly have a great run up to them, did we? You know, we weren't pulling up trees or anything, and yet on the night we turned up. I really do think at the moment this team has only got the sights set on one thing, and that's the cup.
Even the fans too seem to be that way.
Yeah, I think the fans and if it was if it was the semi-final tonight and we'd lost against Liverpool, we'd already lost against Forest, and we was asking the same, you know, what's the atmosphere going to be? I'd still say it was going to be electric. Doesn't matter how it's led up to it, because I think we're all just clinging on to that one little bit of hope that this is our year. I think most of us have kind of, well, we have given up on the league, obviously. But I mean,
no, you have. There's a lot of Spurs fans out there that haven't. DB's raging in the comments when you say that. He's not
no,
happy with
but
you.
I don't mean it as in I don't care. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
I'm the same as everybody. You know how
Yeah.
positive I am and wanting to win every single game. If you ask me, we go unbeaten all year. But I just think it's one of those at the moment that it's as much as I want to win tonight, I want to win against Liverpool and I want to win the remaining games. I mean, I've got to admit that, you know, I'm only clinging on to the Europa Cup because what's the best we can finish? Yeah, maybe I don't know. Can we get to 10th? But I just think for tonight, I mean, tonight's almost a giveaway match that, in the sense of we can afford to rest some players, but we could also afford to play a full strength team because we've got a week or two. You know, to me, we maybe rest against Liverpool instead. But then the argument's going to be, well, if we lose against Liverpool, we're going into a European semi-final on a loss. So what is the answer? I don't know.
We've got a difficult one next week. You know, if they beat us, they officially win the league. You know, and that's going to be one emotional game next week. You know, but I do think you win today. I think maybe fans, if we give it a good go next week and we're not on the right side, can maybe, you know, understand, you know, something like that when you're playing a team at home for them to win it in front of their fans, etc. You know, it is a difficult ask. But I think if we lose today and then you lose to Liverpool, I think all the knives are back out. I think he's got to win today for sure, 100%.
Yeah,
give it a good crack next week.
Or even just performances. The performance just can't be like against Wolves, where it just felt like, you know, there were mistakes, getting outplayed, just a lot of bad factors. You know, if you do just end up getting beaten by a very good and difficult team like Forest, but put up a decent fight, perhaps had some chances in the game, you know, still were able to kind of, you know, give them a good game and give them a good performance. And I think fans, for the most part, would be able to just shrug it off. It's just, I think sometimes it's been the nature of the performances and the nature of the results that have led to this, whatever you call it, just sort of fickleness or kind of this, you know, kind of short-term memory with it all, with the performances. But probably picking up a win here would do just, I think, a lot of good for just riding the good high and riding the good vibes. And maybe against Liverpool, probably will be different expectations. I imagine people will probably rein it in a bit.
But in a sense, what would be more important tonight? To say, give Gray a chance in midfield, put Richie up front, you know, maybe put Danzo in defence or Spence on the right, and, you know, just give those players that have every chance of playing in that semi-final a chance to actually go out and run the legs a bit. But I mean, it's, you know, the argument is, well, it's like with Mickey van der Ven. What do we do with him? What can we afford to wrap him up? Does he need to come out and have another game with Romero, get them legs back? Do we play him against Liverpool? I'd rather see him play tonight and dropped against Liverpool. But you know, I mean, for me, tonight's the night where you maybe see someone like an Archie Gray and a Papsar in midfield with Kulu, or Bergvall, Archie Gray and Kulu. You know, tonight's the night where I just think we've got that chance to try a couple of little things. And I know it's not the, you know, it's a Premier League game and these aren't the games in a sense that we should be trying things out. But I just think the more important game at the moment is the semi-final. And if that means sacrificing league position, then that means sacrificing league position. And you know, that's not my normal stance on it.
No, I know. Look, you know, I think many people will be tossing around with that in their heads. You know, I think many people at the end of the day probably will reside on, yes, Europe should be our main priority. But what I will say is, I think, you know, this is where I think it's a good test of Postecoglou and how well he knows his squad, because you can make rotational changes, but as long as you're not giving charity minutes, you're actually picking players that are hungry midweek during the week, proven in training, then you'll get away with that, because you all of a sudden got players going out there with the right attitude. If he's giving out charity minutes to someone like Basuma, who, look, he knows he's going, we all know he's going, you know, then all of a sudden that's where you enter, trouble, because Basuma ain't really fighting for the cause. You know what I mean? We knew that when he came into this season on balloons. We all know that the rumors that he's going to depart. What we've seen from him from 3 years, he's been a periphery player on the squad. It's not good enough. He has to be moved on. But if all of a sudden you're putting him in just to put him in the shot window and shit like that, that's where you do suffer in games like this. You got to play players that are hungry, that want to try and get in that semi-final. That's where I think Postecoglou has to get that right. He has to see what he's seen since that Frankfurt game and pick players like Sarr. I would be hoping that as soon as he got back in training, he's chomping at the bit. I did say Richarlison is chomping at the bit. He's training really well in the last week and stuff like that. So it's about utilizing that and putting them hungry individuals on the pitch, not individuals that want to save themselves or protect themselves. Because if you're doing that, they start pulling out of challenges. They don't press as hard. They stop making runs because they're fearing of injuries and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you see what you've seen against Wolves at the weekend. You know what I mean? So it's about him just picking the players that are hungry tonight. So he's got to do that for sure. But I do want to move on to a bit of a conversation around Postecoglou, because this is something that have seen put around. And look, of course, it's hypothetical. Postecoglou has to win the Europa League, but I think it's a fair argument. I mean, Man United did decide to keep Ten Hag, who won the FA Cup last term, before sacking him a couple of months into the new season. Now, Tottenham could potentially be in a similar situation that Man United had to confront with Eric Ten Hag if Postecoglou does win the Europa League. So if we do end up in this situation, I want a broad consensus of the panel and the people watching here today. Would you still make a managerial change, or would you give Ange more time? We'll start with you on this one, Jack.
I technically would, mostly because I've premised before. I've said I'd be happy clapping for pretty much an entire year straight. I just wouldn't really be in the position to be that ruthless, towards the manager. I'd also argue that perhaps in terms of the mood around Ange Postecoglou versus Ten Hag, in my memory, maybe because I just listened to TalkSport, which isn't always the best representation of it, but felt like everybody hated Ten Hag. Whereas with Ange, still to this day, there is a very big divide between people who love the guy, people who hate his guts, who don't want to have anything.
Do you not think it's more one way than the other?
I don't know. It's just Ange maybe has more personality than Ten Hag does. He has a bit more bite back than Ten Hag did. Ten Hag was, in my opinion, quite boring. Also in press conferences, kind of just didn't really help himself out very much, similar to Ange, but at least Ange has a bit of that bite back about him. And I wonder if winning a Europa League as well, like I said, an FA Cup is impressive, but to me, maybe winning the Europa League there's something about it that gives it a bit more glamour, a bit more glitz than I think, winning the FA Cup. Also, because technically you're giving what Daniel Levy wants, which is Champions League football, right? He sort of, in a way, I think, does save his job by, finishing solo in the Premier League, but then he's able to give us back the Champions League, which is what makes Daniel Levy happy, certainly would make the fans happy, the fact that he's gotten us a trophy. I think, Dave, I would keep him in the job and then, see how he does in the following season. Of course, we'll talk then, about transfers, how much we're going to back him, that type of thing with recruitment. But for me, the premise and the scenario is very similar to Ten Hag, but I just think that Ange has a very different vibe about him as a person and as a manager than what Ten Hag did. I'd argue that maybe, and you make a good point that perhaps it is similar in terms of the hatred, but I'd argue that Ten Hag didn't have as many defenders as Ange Postecoglou does. Seems like there are still a lot of people who believe in Ange, or at least defend Ange more than anyone ever defended Ten Hag.
No, look, I think I can sort of get with that as well. And I think, the fact that Ange is trying to play a certain way compared to Ten Hag, I think, maybe gives him a little bit more leeway. The fact that he is trying to play attacking football, everyone does prefer to see that. But what I will say, and one thing that, I've thought deeply about the last few days, regardless of my opinion or anybody else's opinion out there, he's got the players on his side and he's got the coach inside the club.
Maybe
on
that
his
too.
I was asked this on last word on Spurs, and that was the answer I sort of gave about us, is the fact that he's still got all these guys on side. And look, we can sit here and dispute all we want. At the end of the day, the crowd were absolutely hugging him. The management team were all over Ange Postecoglou. You could see what it meant to them. The players on the pitch after Frankfurt game, I mean, the hug with Romero, that had to come with an over 18s warning, and some of the other affection that he was getting from players. It's clear, know, and when you listen to Van de Ven heading into the game, we want to win this for Ange. Johnson said something similar last week as well, heading into the Frankfurt game. Vicario's come out since and said something similar as well, that they still are behind Ange. They're not looking for a change and stuff like that. Madison, Spence, Kulu, you name it. A lot of them have come out with the same sort of rhetoric, that despite how us fans feel or what maybe the media are portraying, that they're still getting this inside the camp. And I think if you have that, that's what still gives this guy a chance compared to your Nuno, your Conte, and your Jose Mourinho at this football club. When their time was coming to an end, there was massive split in the dressing room, you know, and stuff like that. You would almost argue, you know, they've lost it. You know, Nuno lost absolutely everybody. You know, Conte had lost the dressing room towards the end as well, whereas Postecoglou hasn't. And that's what I still think gives this guy a fighting chance. Now, look, you know, odds on are that he's still favorite to be sacked rather than actually continuing this job next season as we stand here today. But the reality is, if you've got people pulling their weight behind you, you still have a massive chance. And the reason why they're doing that is because whether people like it or not, he has been a shield for everybody inside that football club. The players, the recruitment team, the ownership, anything that's been asked, he said, my responsibility, I'm responsible. That garners respect from people in around you, behind you, the people that you're protecting. And I think we've seen the culmination of that on Thursday night.
That's a very good
Just
point.
My feelings.
No, it's a good
People in the
point.
chat, let me know. Go on, Jack.
No, I
And
just
then
think
we'll hand
that
it over.
I should have mentioned the players part. Maybe again, if you were to compare him to Ten Hag, I think again, you know, Ten Hag didn't look like he was inspiring much of the players, or he had a lot of buyback or defense from his own players, whereas Ange definitely does. Yeah, there are definitely people within the club that seem to also, you know, be backing him and defending him again in comparison to Ten Hag, which was very different. So that's a better point. Well said.
Anyone else want to come in on that, lads?
Would you keep him after?
Yeah, the one thing that I will say is that the respect that Ange Postecoglou has with inside Tottenham Hotspur is unbreakable. Think about how much cover that he's ran over the course of the season when it came to the injury crisis, when it came to a terrible January transfer window, and who was standing front and center, taking cover for Johan Lang, for Scott Munn, for Daniel Levy, and their in their version of risk assessment. Right, it was Ange Postecoglou falling on that sword time and time again. And it's hard to justify getting rid of a manager that brings you your first European trophy since 1984, while at the same time cleaning up the dirty work and being asked the dirty questions by the media, running cover for your own players when play doesn't necessarily meet up to expectations. Right? It's as a player, you would have to look at your manager as somebody that has your back regardless of whether you're performing up to standard or not. Same thing with the technical staff, the front office, and the ownership group. It's Ange Postecoglou standing front and center, and that's just something that buys a lot of stock in a lot of people's eyes. And so if he's able to finish this job, it's going to be hard to justify getting rid of him, considering that this is a club that does not win anything really. So if he's able to deliver, of course he deserves that third year.
I mean, we did the show yesterday, didn't we, Steve, when this news broke that we were given that.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
Daniel and Ange and Daniel Levy and Ange have come to an understanding that, look, despite the poor form and the arguments that happened, it would be difficult to part ways with him if he won the Europa League, even with the new ownership group. They've said also getting rid of Ange if he won the Europa League would be increasingly more difficult and wouldn't go down well with the fans. So we're not at a Ten Hag moment. Ten Hag was totally different. Nobody was behind Ten Hag. As you rightly say, Dave, the players are behind him, the coaching staff behind him. The majority of the match going fans are behind him.
Don't know about that.
I've heard people going, I've spoken to a few people that go quite regularly to the ground, that they're not as much Ange out as we are everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So I think if you win a European trophy, I think you have to keep him. He has to stay, no matter what you think of him. No matter how you feel about him this season. It's been a hard season, and we're all entitled to our opinions. We're all entitled to our frustrations, and we're all entitled to being angry of what we've seen. 16 or 17 defeats in the league isn't good enough. But you win a major European trophy, our first one for 41 years. Then how can you sack the manager? You can't. Even Levy has come to that realization. If you win me the Europa League, it's it would become very difficult to part with them.
Yeah,
And-
you have to take in consideration too.
And
Big up
also,
Dermot, by the
sorry,
way.
Donovan, I was just
All
going to
good.
make one more point. Sorry. And also with the new ownership group, if when they do come in and Angie's still there and we're in Champions League, he'd be able to get the players he wants for his system. So, do you know, I think, you know, I think you keep him. It's not like a Ten Hag bit, but you know, I think Ten Hag's totally different. But that's me. Sorry, Donovan, didn't mean to. I just want to get
it's
that
all
last
good.
bit out. Sorry.
No, it's all good, man. You make great points. I'm not going to cut him off. I'm only here for a little bit. Big up, Dave and Jack. And I haven't met this other gentleman here. Sorry, who's this guy? What's his name?
Steve.
Hey, Steve. How to meet you, man? Nice to meet you,
What?
Steve. Yeah. So I'm not accusing him of being a flip flop. I just was bantering. But the reality of the situation is these players are like professionals at the end of the day. They have to take care of number one. Like teamwork is great and everything, but if the team's falling apart and you're going to relegation battle, people who've been in relegation battles know that it's those last 5, 6, 7 games when the ship is gonna sink. Everybody's looking at like to jump. People are lining up contracts for their next job. People are lining up clubs in like different countries. Like they're ready to move house. People are packing up their homes. But the players have to like take care of number one. Nobody wants to be relegated. So they have to have that, keep that card up their sleeve, so to speak. So if it does go like gets up, you know, they can throw the manager under the bus. And that's just the players coming out saying and proving to everybody that nobody wanted to do that because they love this man. And then the man is so genuine, you can see it. And yeah, he's rough around the edges in the media, and maybe he doesn't play nice with others. But I mean, everybody has their flaws. And when you're that popular, your flaws are so glaringly obvious. And so, yeah, if he does finish the project, as Steve said, yeah, the man deserves a job, and that's a good way to put it. Finish the job, because we have finished the job. We haven't gotten over the line in 16, 17, 18 years under Lenik, under Levy, and whatever ownership comes in. But yeah, I do have to work here soon, so I'm only gonna be on here for 10, 20 minutes. But a big up chat, and yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. So,
nah, you must be buzzing after the reaching the semi-final, eh?
Well, I'll tell you what. These glasses aren't anything as near as when I lopped on the stream there and I saw there where Jack was. What was he saying? Famous quote. I'm just gonna sit here and exhale, guys. I'm just gonna exhale. Just gonna sit here and exhale, guys. That's all I gotta do.
Honestly, man, that game was so emotional all the way through. I was given a 5-minute countdown, 5-minute marker. Just make it there without the CD. Honestly, it was an absolute
that was
bad
great.
game. But Soren, I do want to come to you because I do think, you know, on this sort of debate, and again, it's still like I said, he's still more favorable, you know, more favorite to be sacked than he is continuing next season. But I think the big sort of debate comes around, and Tyler has sort of alluded to there in the chat. It's around our Premier League form, you know, and I think that's where the debate comes in because, you know, you look at our league form, it's been absolutely crap. 17 losses this season. It's hard to take on 11 wins, 4 draws. You know, we've lost more than what we being able to pick up points. So, I mean, the question to you is, you know, where do you think we can, you know, where do you think the domestic campaign has gone wrong, and is it fixable heading into next season? Because I think that should be the talking point around this when we're talking about this. Is you look at where we've been poor the most, and do you have faith that he could turn that around next season? I guess is what I'm asking, because I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Quite torn on Ange. He certainly wasn't the manager that I wanted to come in. That said, he is the manager, and I'll back him as long as he's got the job. But I think, like most Tottenham fans at the moment, it's hard to support him 100% when the league form, and let's be honest, we all say the league doesn't lie, and the league form, and yes, there's, you know, there are excuses, there are reasons, but it has not been good enough this year. It has been absolutely woeful. And if we win the cup, does he get a bit longer? Yes, I think he should. Do I want him to be here next season? I'm torn, because yes, I do want him to be here next season, but I just can't put up with the bloody shit from half the fan base whinging about him, and not, you know, going into a game and been more worried about losing, not because the team have lost, but because of all the crap and told you so's and things like that that comes out afterwards. And does that, that changes if we get a new manager, but it'll start again because half the fan base will be whinging about whoever we're getting next. So
does winning solve that though, Soren? Does winning that cup? Like we don't know, man.
well,
like we don't know, right?
This is a conversation me and Jack had a few days ago after the stream. And as much as I think it does appease a lot of fans, going into next season, if we start losing, for me, those fans will go back to being Anjou. Those that are on, I mean, I think somebody put a stat in earlier saying 90% of fans are Anjou. I don't believe that. I think it's a lot less than that. I think the noisy fans are certainly Anjou. I think a fair percentage probably still sit on the fence whether they're Anjin, Anjou.
Yeah.
And then I don't think there are many that are fully Anjin.
Everyone's still skeptical. You can clearly see a lot of everyone's still skeptical, and rightly so at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you talk to a few fans, they're certainly Anjin, but there aren't many. Most are probably a bit like me, where we want him to succeed. We're very frustrated at the fact of we're not succeeding, and kind of almost if he stays, we're not bothered. If he goes, we're not bothered. I think that's probably a fair percentage of fans are like that. If he wins, I hope he stays, and I hope he proves those that are Anjou wrong, and I hope he does go on to be our most successful manager for a long time, because I mean, it's hard to see all the shit that he gets, and look, a lot of it is deserved. I'm not saying it isn't deserved, but for me, I'm one of those fans that just think you support your team through thick and thin, and when you're losing, that's when, and I'm going to get stick for this, I know I am, but that's when the true fans come out. When you're losing and they're still backing your team, you're still backing.
I don't like that though, Soren. I'll tell you why, because reality is, even though, people weren't happy with Andrew or the players, whatever else, everyone was still here for every game. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Maybe what you're maybe the more vocal ones will come out and sing and stuff like that. But the reality is, everyone was still here for every game, my man. The support was still there.
Yeah, I don't mean it. Sorry. Like I said, I don't really mean it as in you're not fans or anything. I don't mean it that way. But, it's one of those that I think the old adage, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and things like that. We're going through a really shit time, and us as fans, when you're in the stadium, when you're outside, and look, I have no problem with anybody's opinions. If you're Anjou, if you leave you out, fine. That's your opinion, and I get that. It's when all the mud flinging comes and things like that. But to me, when you go in that stadium, you're behind the team. You support your team. You sing for your team. Doesn't matter. If you look, I mean, how many times have we played teams and we're winning them, but their fans are still singing, because that's how, and I'm not saying that some of our fans are the best fans in the world, and the away fans are absolutely tremendous. But I just think sometimes you just want to see that when we are going through these bad patches, that it's as the fan base, we're united. And I get why we're not. I'm not having a go at people, but for me, my opinion and the way I am, I just think you go into your game, you support your team, you come out. If you've lost, you say what you've got to say, but then you're back to, you reset and you start again. And I know some fans are totally opposite way to that, and I get where they come from, and I get their frustrations, and that's fine. But for me, I'd like to see Ange Postecoglou succeed, simply because he is the manager of our football club right now.
I just think, Soren, you and I
don't know if I answered your question there or not.
No, you have.
I just wanted to add that I think what you and I, it was after the stream, like you mentioned, but what you and I were disagreeing over was you kind of felt like people would just quickly, after Ange, if Ange wins it, that people would still quickly jump on the bus of wanting him out. I said to you that I feel like you might be underestimating like how much people will just be relieved from winning a huge trophy like that. And, maybe the intensity of the criticism of Ange or even just people's feelings towards Ange might actually subside for a little while, just because the high of winning that trophy, in my opinion, would go on for a long time. I mean, I joked to you that I would have a flare up my ass for a good season, pretty much. So it's just, I think there are fans like that would just be so relieved to finally see Tottenham get over the line, no longer be the banter club anymore for at least a season, and just have that huge weight off of our back. And probably there still will be people criticizing Ant here and there, but I just think the sheer division and intensity of it all would actually succeed to a degree, which is, I think, where you and I were disagreeing.
I just think it depends how far into the season we've gone before.
Probably.
I mean, if we're 10, 12 games in and we've only won 1 or 2, I think it's divided straight away. If we're going in and it's, we're doing better than we are this season, and you can see a bit of momentum and we've got some new players in, then I totally agree with you. I just think it all. Look, through the summer, before the season starts again, it is going to be phenomenal. The buzz will be there. But let's not forget, it's not just Ange in, Ange out. It's Levy. If he doesn't support Ange and we go into next season, you've already got questions being asked as well with that. But
that's true.
If the performances are there going into next season and we're winning, whether we win every match or, win loads, I think it all depends how we start. If we've got a lot of losses, if we go in and lose first 5 or 6 games, I just think it'll just implode again.
Look, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because, I think even after the semi-final, I do see some people's opinions maybe changing, maybe not even changing, but just even easing off the gas a little bit, and I think that's maybe what Jack is alluding to. So it'll be interesting. I just want to take two comments just quickly, and then I need to get to Al Dante. Alex says, I love this waffle. Ange needs these players. How much money have 400 million? Enough money spent.
First of all, Alex.
I just want to say, you complain a lot about the recruitment and the caliber of players we bring in. So, take that into consideration. Also, you're just taking a figure, but, the likes of Elise, Hyuk, they all come out of that 400 million. The money for Kulu and Poro that were already done deals before he walked in the door comes out of that. So that narrows down your figures a lot more. And last of all, you could say we're talking waffle. You've sat there all season saying you don't rate this guy, tactically clueless, not going to win anything. You dropped the video today saying we're going to win the Europa League. So don't come and sit here and tell me that we're talking waffle over that one. So that's you dealt with, Mr. Box Office, and I'm not afraid to debate you. Let's get it done. And Meme Hook, look, you're more than entitled to your opinion as well, my man. What I would say is we do run fan shows over here, and we also run fan shows over on Big Up. So feel free, to come on one of them and get your point across. Air it out with us in a cordial way, of course. And, let's hear what you have to say, my man. But, yeah, that's what I want to say. Anyone else want anything else to say?
Donovan wanted to come in.
Yeah, Donovan, you wanted to come in on the conversation. Have your saying, then we'll move on.
Yeah, no, the relief of winning a trophy, I think, is going to finally, settle everyone's nerves. And I think that's kind of what it is. Everyone just, pent up, kind of like alone and this kind of, what is it, trophyless drought of 18 years? Some of us haven't even been along that long, and some of us, I am 27, but I still haven't won no trophy yet. And man, I cried when James Madison went down. Couldn't show bravery there. So some of us lose our heads over the smallest things here. So no disrespect to Alex, I'm sure you have a great platform and everything, but it is different when you come on here and you share your opinion. It is not waffle, but he has their own opinions. We need to keep it cordial and respectful. But I would like to share some time with you, man. So I wouldn't mind dropping off screen here, and you can hop on here and have your say. But at the end of the day, we're all Tottenham fans, and I would like to think that if we do win a trophy, that does get that monkey off our back and that bad voodoo. Somebody broke a mirror. Somebody broke some great big painting somewhere in some church somewhere, because there's no way Tottenham fans here are cursed because I don't know, man. Harry Kane, what's he gonna do this year? Is he gonna win as well? No, big up, Alex. A lot of respect for you, man, and hope to actually speak to you. Soon. So.
Big up, Donovan. Well, look, you go and earn the bread, my man, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Good to see you, Donovan.
Have a
See you,
good one,
brother.
my man. DB says box office a meme hook. Unlike other channels, Dave and Jack welcome all views and not likes. Fair enough. Yeah, look, that's what we always try. You know, look, I don't mind the smoke at the end of the day. You know, I do enjoy Alex's smoke, to be honest. But, you know, if you're going to go after other people for consistency, just make sure you're consistent yourself. Don't switch up from going, this guy's useless, not going to win a thing, to all of a sudden, you know, we're going to win the Europa League. I mean, it's absolutely madness, you know. So just saying, you know, if you're going to, you know, have a pop, make sure you stay consistent. But anyway, look, let's keep it moving. I do want to take a couple of responses from the chat there. I think Tyler
I think we had
one.
El Dante's comment as well.
El Dante,
and then also 400 in the house. By the way, please, everybody, do smash the like button. Less than 100 likes. So I'd like to think more than a quarter of you are enjoying the stream thus far.
No, big up, everybody. Really appreciate everyone tuning in, and keep getting your opinions in, and we'll keep, you know, bringing them up as we go along. But Tyler was, I'll get back. I'll try and find Tyler's comment. But
Yeah.
El Dante says, member for 8 months. Come on, you Spurs. Time to win again tonight. Best wishes to all. Look, we really want to win tonight. We all need to go and get into our lumberjack outfits, commit deforestation. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there probably protesting against that. But at the end of the day, Spurs need is greater. So hopefully we can do that. Cut down the trees and let's fucking go. Come on, Al Dante. Let's keep the good vibes going. Hopefully. Now, I'm well aware there's potential we could just come out with egg on our face tonight. But at the end of the day, you know, I've made no excuses. I look for any reason to happy clap because they come so few and far in between. But I think Tyler was saying as well, back to maybe, you know, what Soren was saying there a little bit, the fact that if we're talking about Angelou's 5 or 6 games already at the start of next year, you know, we shouldn't really be giving him that opportunity then, right? He said it shouldn't even be a question. Soren?
Sorry. No, what the argument with that one is that it's not so much that they expect us to lose, or, you know, I just think if we go in and we win the league, we win the Europa Cup. I mean, I hope all the fans are jovial and, you know, and shouting and blah blah blah, and we all put our differences behind us, and for them few weeks or whatever it lasts, that's brilliant. But I just think that it's all, you know, where we say we'll all get behind him if he wins the cup. I just think how fickle people are in general, not just Tottenham fans or whatever, that as soon as it starts to go downhill again, it will, you know, the fickleness will come out. But I mean, I just hope that, you know, he goes on, he wins the cup, and we go on and have a fantastic season next year. We've got what Daniel Levy wants, where we're in Champions League, because that's all that matters to him. We know that. And, you know, hopefully we back the manager and get a few decent players in. And look, I just hope that one day we start to be successful. I mean, you know, we support a team that's, I mean, it's never been a league winning. I mean, we have won the league, but But, you know, we've never been the most successful team in the world. We've never gone on runs where we're winning cups left, right, and centre. But yet, all of a sudden, our fan base think that that's what should be happening. And the frustration is there. You know, you've got half the fans saying we're not a big club, and then the other half saying we are a big club and we should be winning this, we should be winning that. And I just think it'd be nice, you know, for a period of time where we've actually got something that we believe in. And I don't know whether Ange is that manager that we can all eventually get behind and he'll turn it round. I don't know. I'd like to think he is, because I don't want to go through all this again and again and again. But I just think, you know, the beginning of next season, when we win the Europa Cup, the beginning of next season will still be very important, because if it doesn't keep rolling, we'll just be back to where we are now.
Yeah. No, look, when it comes to Ange Postecoglou, I'm still, you know, on the fence. I'm still leaning more one way, that maybe he should still go next season, you know, because at the end of the day, we're still a long way from winning that Europa League. I just think if he wins that, I just think the media narrative changes, which then does influence fans' opinions and stuff like that to a certain degree. I just think a lot will change. But look, we're a long way from it yet. Like I did say, it was hypothetical anyway in the first place. And we have this from Faz Radfire, says fans should remain patient for Europa's sake. Come on, you Spurs. Look, interesting. Look, I think many people are kind of going to sit back and wait to see what happens in the semi-final. From what I've seen, the reaction since the Frankfurt game, people just want to win games. It brings that joy. It brings that glee. I mean, look, I speak for myself, but I wonder, is there many out there? Bounced out of bed Friday morning, bounced out of bed Saturday, bounced out of bed Sunday, and I'm still absolutely on a high today. No one can take me off it. That's what a win does, a big win like that. And look, I just want to continue that feeling. I think many people are the same. What I have seen is maybe a lot of the critics who will maybe get him out or hashtag Ange out. I have seen people put the brakes on that, pump the brakes on it a little bit. I do think, in fairness, most people are going to sit back and wait and see. But what I would say is, before that, I do think the outrage was absolutely spot on. I do think it's correct. You can't just sit there and have blind faith that everyone's going to turn good at this football club. You do have to scrutinize. You do, like, it's the same with players, right? People check up on the stats. You're not producing more often than not. You're out the door. It's the same with a manager to a certain degree. And I think there has to be an understanding when you're not winning games, there is going to be a negative atmosphere around. People want to call it toxic. Be my guest, but there is going to be a bad feeling around the place. There's going to be anger, animosity, etc. It's to be expected. But likewise, when you win, people are going to be absolutely
100%.
happy. That's what we're all here for at the end of the day. We just want to win games of football. No one wants to be sitting here, get this person out, get that person out, sack this person, sack that person. No one wants to do it. In an ideal world, we just want to sit here, watch our team play sexy football, and try and go and win games. That's what we want.
Yeah.
And
the difference between winning and losing, it's the mood difference, 100%.
Just quickly as well. One second, just quickly as well. I think, where people maybe don't have an understanding is, a lot of people go, oh, geez, the anger towards Ange, that's a bit much. It's not all Ange. You've got to remember, it's been built up since Pochettino, under Jose Mourinho, under Nuno, under Conte, under Stellini, under Mason. It's been built up for a number of years. And the next guy that comes in the door, if Ange doesn't win that, you feel the exact same thing. It's just built up anger 100%. Until someone can get us over the line. But I think if someone gets us over the line, I think people go, you know what? Let's back off and let's believe. I think it comes down. Someone put in a comment in there, a little bit back. He just goes, look, people can say we're fickle. You're mental if you think that football fans aren't fickle. Each one of us are. And that's the truth. Every single one of us are. It doesn't matter your opinion. We win, we're buzzing, we lose, we're angry. It's the nature. It's not why we're in football, the emotions that it brings out and stuff like that. Sorry, I think who wanted to come in?
I think Soren wanted.
I was just going to say quickly where you're saying that. I mean, I was reading on Friday morning, so the day after we've gone into the semi-finals, by a couple of quite noisy fans that are on social media, that are in the WhatsApp groups, that, we only won because it was the players that won. Ange had nothing to do with it, but every time we lose, it's Ange's fault. So these are the fans that are never going to be on board. The same fans were saying, I knew we were going to win because the players would win it for us. It has nothing to do with Ange. I think Ange did a fantastic job on Thursday night. He did everything he needed to do, but you will never please those fans.
Look, you're never going to please the entire fan base, I'm sure there's probably one or two City fans that are bored of Guardiola and want them gone to a certain degree, you know what I mean? You're never, ever going to appease the entire fan base. But what I would say is it's about appeasing the majority. You get the majority on your side. It's like anything. McDonald's doesn't appease everybody. They try when they're starting to bring in salads, even though they're known for burgers. But at the end of the day, a lot more people like them than they don't like them. That's why they survive. But look, guys, I do want to move on. I want to have a little bit of a conversation. I think we'll go to you on this one, Steve, because I know you're a big fan of bringing you through, and I know Shawnee Maddox, if he's watching, has been on about this a long time. Look, realistically, as much as we want to win the Premier League games, we've made that clear. We're not really playing for anything in the Premier League matches. And, I've heard a lot of fans say this is an opportune time to integrate academy players and assess squad depth maybe ahead of next season, bring a couple up and see if they can, fill out a couple of positions, which means then you narrow down what you need to buy and then you can focus properly on bringing the best quality in them positions. Is that something you would do if you're in Ange's position right now? Or do you go back to maybe what Soren said earlier on in the stream, where it's like, look, you give players the opportunity to have a chance of playing the semi-final, even if they don't make the starting 11?
Yeah, what's interesting, because I also did say that I wasn't a really big fan of heavy rotation going into today's game. that being said, it's like there's going to be opportunities down the road. I think we still have Brighton, Crystal Palace still left on the schedule as well too. There are opportunities where you can rotate young players in, the likes of Archie Gray playing at his natural position. The last thing I want to see is a dude like that being stuck at right back, being played out of position just for rotation's sake. When what you really want to do is make sure that he gets minutes at that natural position heading into training camp as well too. So there is an understanding that he will actually be supplying a challenge at that position come next season. Same thing with Mikey Moore, depending on whether you guys see him at the right or the left wing. There are, just like Archie Gray, there are opportunities where you can get him in. Same thing with even Dane Scarlett. If you really want to give him some run out there, there are going to be opportunities. And when I look at the schedule, it all depends, right? I think we have Liverpool coming up after this one, and I think we also have West Ham and Brighton, and there's also another one I'm forgetting right off the top. But there you go. Yeah, there's going to be opportunities where you can pinpoint certain opponents where if you want to give 60 minutes to some of these guys, it would be an opportune time, because one of the things that has to happen is match sharpness, especially for a guy like Archie Gray who hasn't seen a run. He actually has to get on the field at least a few more times before the end of the season. But you also want to see exactly just what they have at their natural positions. That's kind of the unknown, right? Especially for a guy like Archie Gray, we know what he can do at the right back and potentially even the center back position. But what we don't know is that what his actual skill set at this level is at his natural position. So 100%. 100%, I think there is going to be opportunity to do that towards the end of the year, and Ange absolutely should 100%, because I think you highlighted earlier, the last thing you want to do is give garbage minutes to a dude like Yves Bissouma just for putting him in the shop window's sake. There's absolutely no reason to waste minutes when you have young guys that absolutely need those minutes, first and foremost. So yeah, 100%.
Look,
because why did you spend the money if you weren't going to play?
Look, I think it's a hard one to sort of navigate, because I do believe, when you're not really playing for anything in the league, I do think it is an ideal opportunity if there is a youngster or two, that you've been having your eye on, to maybe give him an opportunity. It's how Mikey Moore ended up being kept around this season, right? Towards the end of last season, he was dipped in, and stuff like that. But I just wonder how many are people expecting. Like, we can't go down the route where we're giving every one of them a chance. I think Correct. What we should be doing is looking. Well, I agree with Mikey Moore for sure. There's rumors that he's unhappy right now to a certain degree. I don't know how true they are. But there's rumors that he's not too happy. I think he should be given more minutes between now and the end of the season, help him acclimatize to the Premier League. Because the reality is, you're never ever going to get a better opportunity to get some of these guys Correct. Ready going forward. Because next Correct. Season you're straight into it. Every game matters unless we're in a similar position. History tells us we probably will be. But you're never going to get an ideal opportunity. I think Callum Malassesi is an interesting one. Fended off interest from big clubs around Europe to sign a 3-year deal. Do you maybe potentially look at him and bringing him through, giving him minutes instead of someone like Bissouma, Archie Gray in the number 6? I think there is certain ones he can do, but what I would say is you also have to take into account we already have one of the youngest squads in the Premier League to a large degree. You bring in some of them academy youngsters, you are going to lower that even more. You've already seen a lot of the mistakes that we've already made on the pitch due to youthfulness and naivety and stuff like that. There's a chance that it could have another adverse reaction as well. But look, I'm not calling for them to start, but I think there's definitely an opportunity off the bench to give them minutes. Someone like Ajayi earlier on in the season off the bench in Europa League, he's done what he basically showed our senior wingers what we're expecting of them. Pick up that ball, play a 1-2 with someone and put it in the back of the net. It's not difficult. So I think there's opportunities, and I think we should turn to some of them, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be in the semi-final if it wasn't for the likes of Ajayi, Scarlett, Mikey Moore, showing cojones earlier on in the Europa League campaign against the likes of your Asia Alkmaars or Carabags, Ferenc, or whatever other teams we played, stuff like that. So I do think to a degree they should be awarded, because they've already shown that they can hang to a certain degree at this level. So I do think there's opportunity for them to get minutes. I mean, is there anyone on the panel that's maybe against it?
I feel like, when it comes to the youth project, it seems like it's already a little too late, to give them a ton of minutes here, because I think Ange just has to focus on these upcoming Europa League games and try to get the squad that he knows he plans on using for the remainder of the season in the best possible shape and confidence that they're in. You know, I'd like to see the younger players be filtered in, you know, as maybe substitutions, but to give them starting minutes and whatnot at this stage, it feels like it's a little too late at this point. I think there were other opportunities earlier on in this season to do that. He didn't take them, which he has been criticized before, you know, by you and me, as well as people like Sean and whatnot. But at this stage, Dame, I'm in the camp where the squad that you will be kind of rotating for these Premier League and Europa League games is the squad, which is a smaller squad, which he should be using. The likes of Pop Matasar, Bergwall, you know, rotating them in, you know, Jed Spence, you know, rotating in and out with, you know, Poro and Udogi. That's what he should be doing, because then he can also get a gauge of who he would trust for the semifinal, you know, whereas he's not going to be trusting Demola Ajayi or, you know, Mikey Moore for the semifinal. Almost feels like it's too late. But, you know, I'd like to see them, you know, be given minutes towards the end of games.
No, 100%. I definitely agree with that. But Will Ange, you know, I would argue when he had that injury crisis, maybe he should have been a bit braver and turn into some of these young guys. You know, maybe the opportunity is being passed, like Jack said, but it'd be interesting because I know, you know, Sean Maddox is on his case over that. You know, I think if Ange does do that, I think Sean Maddox might like him a little bit. And we've got this from Daniel Field, says, come on, you effing Spurs, give us a happy Monday. Look, it'll complete the Easter weekend. Absolutely brilliant, you know. Look, Tottenham have been, you know, in the abyss for a couple of years since Poch, my GAA team, were in the abyss for a good long time as well. But, you know, both are in semi-finals now. So, you know, I'm absolutely loving life, Daniel. And I want to keep the vibes going, my man. Big yourself up. Let's bloody go. Big game tonight. Hopefully we can get the win and just keep the vibes going. Big up, Dan, as well. Great to see you. Hopefully you're keeping well, my man. Guys, I do want to have a chat about Richarlison, though, just for a minute before we maybe get into the back line and stuff like that. Ange Postecoglou has made it very clear that Richarlison is set to get game time for Tottenham in the next couple of Premier League fixtures. Now, you know, including Europe, if we make the Europa League final, that's 9 games left this season. If we don't make the Europa League final, there's a guaranteed 8 games for him to try and make an impact. Is there anything Richarlison can do over the next few games to save his Tottenham career? Because, you know, look, some would probably say, look, there's absolutely nothing. You can't take the gamble that this guy's going to be fit next year. We've took that gamble for 3 years on the trot, and he hasn't been fit. He's been out the majority than what he's actually been available. But is there anything he can do to save his Tottenham career over these, you know, remaining 8-9 games? Anyone want to come in on that?
I don't think so.
Score the winner in the final.
That's a fair one.
Like a Divock Origi sort of kind of. He can become like an Origi
in the final.
Yeah, the Origi. Yeah, Origi. Yeah. Dermo, but you were saying you don't think so?
I don't think so. I think if he's been out injured as much as he has been out, how can you trust him? Every time he gets going, he breaks down again. I just think you need to move him. As much as I love Richarlison, as much as I love his shithousery and what he does on the sideline and the support he gives the team when he's injured, he's on there, you can see his passion. But I think if you're looking to win trophies and you're looking to consistently go deep into competitions and do well in the league, you need a squad that's going to be fit. That players are not going to break down after every 6 or 7 games. I mean, he scored a goal and got injured from scoring a goal. I mean, how unlucky can the guy get? I think, look, if a good price comes into him, we could do a swap for Breathwaite from Everton. There's a couple of Saudi Arabian clubs wanting to put money in for him as well. I think you sell him in the summer. Thank him for what he's done, but it hasn't worked out for him. It really hasn't. And I've always said it, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He was a big fish in a small pool at Everton, where everything was slightly built around him, and he's came to Tottenham, and he seemed to have got lost a little way. He's got all the injuries, and I think it's time that we can't trust him. And I mean that in a nice way, not a negative way. And I think if we get a good price for him in the summer, then thank you for your services. We'll always welcome you back with open arms if you want to come back and visit, but take the money and run. And what we paid for him, I think, was over the top anyway. So, and we reinvest it in a striker that is going to help Solanke, and that is, if he needs to be there, he's going to be there, not injured. And I think that's been our problem. We've only had Solanke, and when he got injured, we didn't have Richie to back him up. So I think we need to let him go. But I love him, but I don't think he's. I don't think we need to keep him for next season. No.
It was also though the same thing like with Kane. Like when he was brought in to be the backup to Kane or the rotation man for Kane, he also got injured a ton that season, and then Harry Kane was ending up being overplayed the entire season as well. Like Richarlison, his main job has been to just be that rotational, competitive, quality striker, and he's just not been able to do that for whatever reason. I think a lot of it has to do with an incompetent medical team and an incompetent medical staff, but also maybe his own sort of issues, I guess, that his body is just not capable, I guess, of being, able to be played week in, week out. And it also just seems like it's always the most, I wouldn't call them tiny injuries, but it's like just a little tweak, a little, kind of roll of an ankle here. And he's like out for weeks, he's not out for like a game or something like that. Like he misses a lot of game time. People are complaining about how much Romero has missed, like, come on here. Like, Richarlison has missed more than probably like Gio Lo Celso. We're talking that sort of type of player, like a guy that just seems to not find any way to stay fit for whatever reason that might be. But what I will say is to check up on Dave's stats, to steal one of his points before about Richarlison and his strike rate. Last season, I believe, I think he's like on par or even just slightly ahead in terms of goals and assist contributions, or maybe just goals, than Solanke was. If you look at his stats from last season compared to Solanke this year, while also playing 1,000 fewer minutes than what Solanke has this season. So in terms of actual goals to assist ratio, he has been in that. If you just look at his last season under Ange versus Solanke this season, with 1,000 minutes fewer played, he's technically, contributed more if you were just to take by his numbers from last season. But I think at the end of the day, the fitness is the real question for him. No matter how much Dave and I do kind of try to back him and try to provide some nuance and context to the Richarlison situation, I don't think you can avoid the injury part of it. The injury part of it is just insane. But, just to make a joke again, Divock Origi, I remember, was always injured, was always, never available, but he would come on and, score these miraculous, needed goals and in garbage injury time. And he stayed around for a while. Not saying we should do that, but maybe that's his way back in.
When it comes to Richie, I mean, me and Hook is saying Bell was injury prone. This is not about injury proneness. Richarlison cannot control a touch reliably and loses possession too much. Please talk about this. I mean, look, I was going to get onto that because I've seen you were constantly crying about, the injuries. At the end of the day, if you buy a player and he's not available, I mean, that does become the biggest problem. I think you need to, factor that in. It is a problem, that he's been here 3 years and he's barely been available. But, I brought up a stat last week, and I know it offended a lot of people, and people didn't like it, but, sometimes facts do hurt your feelings. Richarlison, he's got 21 goal involvements, 16 goals and 5 assists in 27 starts under Ange Postecoglou. And I think he has the ability to sniff out a goal in this system better than what Dominic Solanke does, And I also would say he works just as hard as Dominic Solanke. And I think when you look at it, is Richarlison good enough to lead a line and be our talisman, to rely on, on his own up front? No, of course he's not. He's nowhere near good enough. I agree with you about his first touch. It's hit or miss. A lot of the times the ball barrels off him the same as Solanke to a large degree. But when it comes to Richarlison, look, he's been here 3 years. You're not just going to sell Dom Solanke this summer. You have to sell one of them if you want to clear the decks to bring another guy in. And unfortunately, Richarlison will be the first one out the door. But I do make the argument. I think Richarlison is better up front than what Dominic Solanke is. Look, we bought Dominic Solanke off the back of one good season hitting them numbers at Bournemouth. When we bought Richarlison, he was consistently, hitting his numbers when we bought him. So for me, I do make the argument. I do think Richarlison is better than Dom Solanke. However, I understand he's going to be the first one out of the door, out of the two.
Yeah, there's an old saying in American sports, what's the difference between good and great? And that answer is availability. If there's one thing that Richarlison can do for himself between now and the end of the season, is make himself available where he can actually be goal dangerous when he steps on the field. Now the question is, how do you do that, right? Do you isolate his best 30 minutes and put himself in a position where he can actually be useful? Do you just throw him out there? For an occasional start? Maybe give him 60 minutes and then bring on Solanke or whatever the case may be. Like, how do we ensure that Richarlison stays available for the rest of the season? That to me is going to be the $1 million question between now and then.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also argue with the whole like good first touch thing and whatnot. Like, yes, he is a bit clunky at times, but he's had some fine games on the left wing before when he's come in, as an impact sub. Like, he has played, some nice passes with the outside of the foot down the line and has actually been effective in various parts of the pitch. He can be useful in other areas. Not saying he is a true winger by any sense. He's definitely not, but he has been effective. Like, he's just a guy that just finds a way to get it done. Whether it's done in a very pretty way, it's another question. But, I think he is an effective kind of clunky type player. Again, not saying he's supposed to be here for the long run or anything, but people they're like saying, oh, he's a complete donkey and whatnot. It's like, come on, like he's been an established Premier League player here for a while for a reason,
Where I agree, where I do think Richarlison is better, and once he put it in here, is I do think in the air. How many times we've seen the ball come in and Richarlison's, finding the flight of that ball and getting on the end of it. Dom Solanke is nowhere near crosses when they come in. Look, they're both shit at taking a touch and getting a half chance on target. They're both crap at that. The ball bounces off both of them. But I do think Richarlison is much better at sniffing out a chance with them balls coming in than what Dominic Solanke is. That's just my feeling on it. But Soren, I think, you sort of agreed with Cap No Pants here. Says, I blame Dom's low goal rate on Andrew's tactics. And look, I can understand that to a certain degree. I think you agree with it. But I would say, I think you can't ignore that last season was the anomaly. He hit them numbers. Every other season before, he's hit similar to what he's doing this season. So I struggle to blame it all on the tactics. Look, could we provide better opportunities, put him in behind more? Could them instructions say, come to play him in behind more and stuff like that? Yeah, of course. But I don't put it all on, like, look, I was one that never got hyped up in the first place about signing him because I questioned, would he be able to deliver at a club like Tottenham? At Tottenham, the pressure's there week in, week out. At Bournemouth, that same pressure isn't there. You're sort of free to a certain degree. If you don't score, there's not that foray around it. There's not that talking point around it. But at Tottenham, there is, So I struggle to blame it all on Andrew's tactics, but I think you might have agreed with him.
I think the tactics play a part, certainly. We under Ange Postecoglou, we do not look for an out-and-out goal scorer. That's not the main part.
Is that like Soren? Because I had this argument when we were selling Harry Kane. People were coming to me, people that had no clue about Postecoglou were all of a sudden experts, telling me that he doesn't need a striker that scores goals. Everyone overlooks Furuhashi. He played up front and he scored 20-odd, 30-odd goals for them. He relies on a goal scorer up front. That notion is absolutely nonsense. What manager doesn't? Even Guardiola, he pivoted and went and got Haaland because everyone relies on that guy.
Yeah, but if you look at the way we play, the biggest role, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the biggest role that we see Richie and Dom Solanke doing, and Son when he's played down the middle, is that closing down role. And when you're closing down as much as them, whoever is our number 9 player, you're not always going to be in the right place at the right time. Now, those that slate Richie off, I get why they slate him off, because you watch him in some games and you just think this guy can't play. Yeah. But then you watch him when he was fully fit and his head was in the game and he was confident, he could bring, his first touch was good and he could keep the ball and he could shoot and he could head. Now you've got a striker there that's probably his strongest point is his heading, and we never put a cross to him. You see these strikers when they do make a run, and we haven't got the players to thread the ball through to them.
Yeah.
So where I say the tactics are that we're not looking for that out-and-out goal scorer, and I'm talking about somebody like a Vardy or a Gary Lineker of past and things like that. Them days, especially under the system we play, we're not going to have that type of striker. We're going to have a workhorse that will hopefully score some goals. Now, look, Dom Solanke and Richarlison in last season and that have had a lot of good chances and they've fluffed them. I don't think there's any argument behind that. But you look at the work rate. I mean, you go back to like them first 10 games of last season and Richarlison was playing. And whenever Richarlison played, we actually played better. Now, I'm not saying he was but that extra man closing down makes a big difference to this type of system. And you've heard Ange say before that he relies on his wingers to score a lot of goals, not just his centre forward. Now, if you've got a centre forward that maybe scores 16, 18 goals, but has another 10, 15 assists, and then you've got your wingers that are doing the same, all of a sudden you don't need that striker to be a 20, 30 goal because you've got more players. You look at those first 10 games under Ange, and I don't think our striker actually scored a goal, but yet we were winning all, first 10 matches because our midfield and our wingers were scoring and our defenders even.
But I made this point before, though. When we had Harry Kane, people were on about, people were going on like no one else scored. Dyer scored from corner kicks, Bentancur scored 5, Højbjerg scored 5, Son scored 15, 17 odd goals. Other people were chipping in with goals. We're going on like other players weren't chipping in. Harry Kane was the icing on the cake, but other players were chipping in. Like that's normal in football. If other players aren't chipping in, you've got a massive problem. Let's not overcook the pudding here,
But we didn't play. Yeah, but Dave, we didn't play the same type of system. I mean, if you look at the way it's designed now, that under Conte and things like that, Harry Kane and Son were the main two. And you look at the stats that Son and Kane had, you're not going to see that type of partnership in a sense like that under Ange Postecoglou. It just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to set up like that. But if you look at how many goal attempts and goal assists and goals across the front three, all of a sudden you've probably got the same amount. But I don't know. To me, it just seems that Ange's obviously picked Solanke to come in, which is a very similar style player to Richarlison. So that's obviously the type of striker he wants. I mean, we could have got what was the other lad we was going to sign?
Gift Orban?
Or Gift Orban.
Yeah.
I mean, a totally different striker, but
Victor
we didn't
Gyökeres.
want him because he didn't put the work rate in. So under Ange's system, he wants a striker that puts the work rate in and contributes an amount rather than be the focal point of the team. And look, to answer the question with Richarlison, if he could stay fit, I'd keep him, but he can't stay fit. So that's the problem. I think if he was a player that could play the amount of games that we need him to play and he was available, I'd have no hesitation in keeping him. But
if he was like a Højbjerg where he's just always around, always available, I think it would be a different story. But and because Højbjerg also we knew had his limitations, had his faults, but the fact that he's just always was available and could put in good performances here and there kind of made him a reliable player. But that's the thing with Richarlison, he's not reliable in any regard.
I mean, and that's the shame because I think a fit Richarlison that suddenly gets confident as well is a damn good player. But Tottenham have not seen a fit Richarlison with confidence. We just haven't seen him.
No,
we've seen him for maybe, I think we had a run of about 7-8 games where he virtually started scoring in every game. And then he was injured again, and that's the problem. He just can't stay fit, and for that reason, I can't see him having any more of a future at Tottenham.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think it's hard to see, beyond this season. I mean, Jack, Stevie, Dermo, feel free to come in on anything you've heard there that maybe you want to hit back on, and then we'll move on.
I just want to say I get where Soren's coming from. I really do get where he's coming from, but and Dave pointed it out. Since Harry Kane's left, we needed Harry Kane did the job of two strikers. Do you know what I mean? He had everything. And to replace Harry Kane, you need two strikers that are going to be there game in, game out. And it was the same under Harry Kane. He wasn't there. I think it's just unlucky. Players get this when they join the club. They can go through a horrendous injury problems and go to the next club and be absolutely fine and not get another injury for 2 years. I just think it's just one of them things. We've been bitten on the arse because we haven't bought the right strikers into the club to replace Harry Kane. And this is where the problem is. We paid too much for Richie. I think we paid too much for Solanke as well. And we really need to do our due diligence on whoever we bring in the summer. Jonathan David is a free. There's one. And there's a few that are out there you can get. But Richarlison, we cannot depend on an injured player every time. And when and he has got more assists, I get the stats that they've said, and the stats speak for themselves. But how many games over 3 years has he actually played a full 90 minutes?
Yeah.
It's not very few. And it's always been half an hour here. So, like Sonny, like me and Steve talked about yesterday, if he does stay, do you use him as an impact sub? Do you bring him on with 20 minutes to go or something like that?
He's always injured.
But when he is fit, do you reduce his game time so he doesn't get injured?
Because I mean, his last injury was when he came on as a sub, wasn't it? And he scored the goal and got injured. So, I mean, I agree fully with you, Dermo, but I just think when you've got a player that just cannot stay fit, it doesn't matter how good they are. I mean, we look at Lamella. Lamella was a brilliant player, but he couldn't stay fit. And we kept him and kept him and kept him. And you kind of look at it and think, why? And I think it's the same with Richard. Look, I'd be as happy as anybody if he could stay fit and he had a run of games with us and was the player that we thought we'd sign. But I just don't see from the last 2 or 3 seasons. It's not like it was just this season or last season. It's all 3 seasons. And when you've got a player that's like that, you look at, I mean, Sessegnon, it's the same argument. You bring him on, he has a couple of games and all of a sudden he's injured again. We can't afford for us to have a player where you're literally carrying him through 3 seasons that you have no faith in the future of him.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Spotlight on Spurs says Richie only missed 20 games while at Everton. This is a Spurs problem. Look at Sessegnon. Yeah, look, I think you can make that point. You look at Solanke as well. Didn't have an injury for 3 years. Comes into Tottenham. He's had two in less than 12 months. It's absolutely madness. Look, that medical department needs a serious looking at. Steve, did you want to say that before we move on?
Yeah, I always go back to some of our matches this season, and I always ask how many times has Dom Solanke been left on an island in the box, marked by 2 defenders because we didn't have runners having that courage to draw off defenders and stretching out that back line. That was one of the that's one of the things that drives me absolutely absolutely crazy, because when you look at Ange Postecoglou's best season, that double winning season with Celtic, even his second season in Japan. I hate to sound flip about this, but for Ange Postecoglou, his best defense is more forward pressure. It's pressure, having a lot of guys, especially your 10s, having that courage to make those runs into the boxes. This was actually kind of interesting last Thursday. How many times did when Romero had the ball at his foot, how many times was he looking to go forward, only to see guys sitting there ball watching instead of actually taking a run into the box and actually being a decoy, so Dom Solanke actually would be put in higher percentage chances where he can get shots on net. It's something that, me personally, I think that's plagued it. And I guess the question is do you guys believe that maybe we have a couple players on the field that are so worried about being caught out that they're not willing to take those risks? You know what I mean? Because of that, right? So it's like, on one hand, I understand exactly what people are saying about Dom Solanke, but I also just kind of look with my own eyes. If Ange ball is predicated on constant forward movement and constant forward pressure, and that's not what we're getting, I would ask what striker in the world is actually good with 2 defenders draped over him.
Harry Kane, we sold him, but you
get what I'm saying, though.
Yeah, I do get your point. I do think it's a fair point. Look, I would personally like to see Solanke with Kulu and Madison in the midfield supporting them, and then Udaber and Tell off either side. Just bring a bit of freshness, bit of dynamic. That's if you can get your defensive structure right behind that, I'll be excited to see what Dominic Solanke can do, because I do think if you've got balls coming in off the right from Udaber, say from Tell, balls from Madison and Kulusevski, I think all of a sudden that opens up. No matter what run Solanke makes, he should be fed that ball. I do want to see, look, I'm not writing off Solanke. The reality is I know he's going to be here next season and probably another season after. I want the guy to come good. I just think Richarlison's better. It's just unfortunate that Richarlison hasn't been fit for 3 years and he has to go. But I would like to see us bring in a better striker that is better than Solanke, because I think maybe having that might actually get Solanke to pull himself to that next level potentially.
Jonathan David,
I don't know what way it's going to go with him. Is that next level in which he needs to find to be at Tottenham Hotspur, or is this his level? And that's what I'm waiting to find out. Big up Patch Thomas, very, very kindly. Look, I've made no bones about it. I just need to win games. I need something to get behind. I need some belief, and that's where I'm at my best, my man. Big up Patch, really appreciate it. But guys, I do want to take a moment though to plug NordVPN, and I think there's no better time because, of course, you know, we will be traveling across Europe still on our Europa League journey. You have to go out to Bodo Glimt, and then also, you know, out to Atletico Bilbao as well, you know, for the final if we make it. And when you go out to these locations, guys, you will not be able to tune in and watch your BBC player, your ITV player, stuff like that, because it's not available in that location. However, NordVPN, you use your NordVPN, and then all of a sudden, hey, presto, you can catch up on everything you want, match of the day or whatever it may be. So make sure you have a VPN in your life. And basically all it does, guys, is it bounces your location. For instance, 3 p.m. blackouts. I'm scratching my head. How am I going to watch the game? You know, I'm going to have to do something boring now. You know, nope, Jack saves my day. He says, Dave, use your VPN, switch your location to my house. We're going to watch this game today. So basically, that's what a VPN allows you to do, guys. And not only that, it allows you to surf the web for better deals for yourself in terms of shopping, booking hotels, flights. There's lots of tricks to the trade on the internet. Look, I'm not down with them all. I know a few that you can actually use to get yourself cheaper flights, accommodation, all that sort of stuff as well in terms of shopping and all that great stuff. And then the next question people pose to me, obviously, is, Dave, but what's the security like? It's a big problem out there nowadays. Well, don't worry about that because NordVPN have that covered. They protect you on public Wi-Fi, and also they protect all your bank details when you're putting them in and getting all your great bargains as well. So it's basically what I would call, you know, great protection in terms of on the internet, even if you're not using it to bounce your location and that, you know, to watch TV stuff. There's other uses for it for the price of a cup of coffee a month. I mean, who doesn't want to feel secure? And you'd be absolutely raging if you didn't, and you'd be thinking back to what we've said here. So, guys, if that does sound great to you, make sure you get across to NordVPN here. Grab our exclusive deal. That's on nordvpn.com. Code is FlatCap. Try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So that's the great thing about as well. Try before you buy. Absolutely brilliant there from NordVPN, guys. Jack, anything you want to add on, or have I covered
listen
it?
Listen to DB there. He's a recent example of a guy using it. He was using it in Rome to access his Netflix, BBC iPlayer, all that good stuff. And I'll be using it very soon when I head over to London so that I can watch back some highlights of games, because oftentimes, you know, in the UK, you get these short highlight packages, but in the US, you get these 10, 15-minute ones for football hipsters like myself that need to get all the action. And I'll be using it, you know, very, very soon when I head over to London. And also when I'm probably on public Wi-Fi over in London too, you know, I'll be using it.
Well, also, that's the thing. If Jack is your idol, you know, there's always one person out there. And, you know, you want to be a football hipster like Jack. You want to watch the Croatian League, the Belarusian League, stuff like that. You need a NordVPN or a VPN, basically a NordVPN in your life, because no other VPN is as quick as NordVPN. And also it allows you up to 10 devices, which is absolutely brilliant. So make sure you get yours. Big up, Les Known as well. Good to see you. Custard says he's using his to watch less Spurs. Absolutely brilliant.
But also just 500 plus in the house. Please, everybody, can we get to at least 200 likes?
Sure,
You know, that wouldn't even be half. That wouldn't even be half. But it'd be nice to get to 200 likes, please.
Oh, 500 plus in YouTube, maybe. So make sure
that
like. And if you are floating around on Twitter and you're toying with the idea of coming over, look, stop flirting with myself and Jack. Get over here, smash that like button, you know, and become a subscriber of the channel. But guys, let's move on, because I do want to talk about the changes that Ange made to solidify that result the other night. I want to know off people, is that something we can see from Ange going forward? Do you think that's something we can expect to see? Do you think maybe there's been a realization that maybe there is a time and a place to be a little bit more pragmatic?
I think so. I think if you're looking, if we're still in Europe, if we get to a final, then yes, I think there will be rotation. There has to be. You're going to have to keep your main players fresh for that final, especially with the semi-final as well. And you think we're traveling really to the Antarctic for the second leg, and that's, you know, I don't know how many hours that is. Yeah, it is. It's the weirdest thing I've ever heard myself say. We're traveling to the Antarctic to play its team in the semi-final. But yeah, I think we do. I think we do have to. We do have to rotate, and I think we have to. I think it's the only logical thing to do. in my view. I'm going to have to jump off in a couple of minutes, lads, because I'm going on early tonight. So I sorry about that.
No, you're all good, Dermo. You're all good. Really appreciate you and you giving up your time as well. Where's Stevie gone?
It
Really
says
appreciate
it lost
Stevie as
his
well.
mic and cam. We can't bring him back on. So Stevie, maybe you got
I
to
have
give it a
that
bit of a
problem.
refresh.
Just plug out your microphone. Usually, when your mic goes, it doesn't allow your cam to come on. It is something in StreamYard I've experienced. So maybe fiddle with the wire that goes into your mic box, because that's a huge problem for me. Usually, I just pull it out, plug it back in, and hey, presto, he's back. Here we are. Absolutely
hit it with a hammer.
Maybe.
Or hit it with a hammer.
Yeah, that's
works.
my trick. I just get a hammer and whack it, and then it works, and then yay, I'm back again. But yeah, sorry, I've got jump, lads. So listen,
No
I let
problem,
Steve plug the channel if that's all right, Steve.
Yeah.
I'll let you do that. I'm going for a 3-0 Spurs win. That's what I'm going for.
Nice. Look, I'll snap your hand off for it now. You know, that'll get me all the way through to the weekend. So big up. Look, Dermo, really appreciate your time today, my man. And
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry I have to jump off. I see you tomorrow, Dave. And then I'll see you guys on Sunday. Soren, lovely work seeing you again. Always a pleasure. And Steve, I'll see you a little bit later on, sir, for the watch along.
sir.
All right, big up everyone. Come on, you
big up,
Spurs.
Dermo.
Come on,
In the big
Spurs.
cockerel
See
we
you
trust.
soon, Tron.
See you soon, Tronny. Bye-bye. Dante,
Tronny,
people
I
are
like
asking about the people are asking about the lineups. They will be out in 5 minutes' time, guys. Don't worry, we're always onto it straight away when they're out here. You know, we always get a bit antsy around this time. You know, hoping the right team selection is out. So don't worry, we will be on it. Soren, do you think that defensive stability, because at the end that's what got us into the semi-final? You know, making that change, maybe going against what Ange prefers to do, which is, continue to play out from the back and stuff like that. Do you think this is something we can see more of between now and the end of the season? Because that's basically what he's guaranteed to be here for anyway. Or do you think it was just a one-off to save his job?
No, I mean, I think when you look at the games that we've played recently, we've always been chasing the game. So you kind of, a lot of the changes have always been, in a sense, a more positive change. But we've seen it before, and we saw it a little bit last year where, to close down a game, he would bring maybe an extra defensive player on somewhere or other. But I certainly think over the last couple of months, we've seen more different formations, systems, so maybe he is adapting. But I mean, you listen to some people from previous, like in Scotland and Japan, and they all said the same, that the first year or two, he just didn't change anything. It was the same system. And then all of a sudden he would start to bring in little tweaks. And then, you look at it sometimes. I mean, when he brought Danso on and went to a back three, I was quite astonished.
So was I. Gave me a little bit of a temper, I'm not going to lie, though.
Yeah, I felt
yeah,
great.
I mean, I thought it was a brilliant thing to do, but I was just like, damn, I didn't see that coming. I kind of was waiting for Romero to go into a number 6 role or something stupid like that. But look, if he's starting to adapt a little bit, and he's changing his formation a little bit, and he's open to a little bit more, then that maybe tells us that there is a more long-term solution. I mean, it could also go the opposite way and say, well, he knows he's going, so he doesn't need to instill the system anymore. I don't know, but I quite like the fact of we are now seeing a little bit more change up from him.
I do want to say I am against him changing his philosophy altogether. I don't want him to do that.
No,
I still want to try and start games where we can, playing out from the back, and all that. But if the press is coming on you, it's intense, you're making mistakes. Tell your players to go longer for the next 5-10 minutes. Get yourself up in the opposition half, then try again. If you're seeing out a game and it's still a tight game and you haven't took your chances, do what he done at the weekend. There's a time and a place for it. He doesn't need to change up absolutely everything and rip up the rule book, because, look, initially I was against that, and I've always been against that. I don't think we should be asking managers to do that. But there is a time and a place, like Thursday night. Keep yourself in the job, see us through to a semi-final. And I think hopefully maybe there's a little bit of a recognition within himself now, moving forward, that he doesn't need to abandon all of his principles. But there's he can still.
That's exactly it, though. Yeah, sorry.
There's a time and a place for everything. I mean, the thing that I don't get is we play out for the back so much. Teams are coming onto us. Why don't every now and again, like you say, just play one long ball and make the opposition think, well,
Keep them honest.
We're expecting them to play, but let's just make sure that they don't put that. And I mean, it's like, if you remember as well, I think it was last season, we were all sat here saying, why don't we ever have a long shot? We never shoot from outside the box, and all of a sudden we did it a couple of times. We scored a few, and then we stopped it again. And you just think, just change an odd little thing up every now and again. I mean, I hate watching that playing out. We take more chances playing out from the back than we do up the top of the field. This is what I don't get. Why do we take all the chances at the back? And sometimes you just think, just frigging boot the ball out. Just get it away.
It worked. It really helped us. But I'd argue that not like he really started going fully pragmatic. I think only until the second half, actually, because in the first half, I could be wrong on this, but I don't know. I'd put down a fiver to say that we still had more possession in the first half than Frankfurt did. Like, there were periods where we were still looking to try to control the game, control the ball. We were sort of playing the way that we usually do, with a high line. And one of the times we nearly got caught out with that big ball in behind for Ekitike, where Van de Ven, was able to make that recovery challenge. But people can check back on the stats on like SofaScore or something on this. But I'm pretty sure in the first half, Spurs did have more shots and then also had more possession than Frankfurt did. So it's not like he just completely abandoned all of his principles and his philosophy. It's just as the game went on and sort of the situation arose where it doesn't look like Spurs are going to grab a second goal here, he then had to sort of change and adapt a little bit. And that's what I think people have been asking for to some extent, but it's not like he just abandoned everything for that game. I think there was a bit of a mix there, which I think we can all be happy with. But yeah, here's the lineup.
We'll let Stevie come in on that, and then we'll go through the lineup. Stevie, have you anything you want to say on that, man?
I think it's all going to be dictated on opponent and also via whether we're at home at the Run. I think we home or on the road. As Soren mentioned, the game plan on the road against Frankfurt, where we were far more compact, even moving forward. Still being able to get out of front foot in the first half, a little bit in the second half before ultimately changing, to a back five. We also saw that in the first leg against Liverpool in the League Cup, where after they carved us up in that home leg, coming back to seeing a far more compact team while still maintaining their identity. There have been times and places where Ange has had to reel it in a little bit just based on the opponent, and I would probably expect there's going to be some more of that moving forward, depending on opponent. So 100%.
No, look, I think I think he'll go a long way to getting more people back on side, and especially if he comes out in a press conference and says, "Look, maybe initially I was against it, but I am learning." I think again you might get more people, sort of giving him another chance. But look, let's go through the lineup. We've got Vicario in goals. Pedro Porro retains his place at right back. Romero and Van de Ven retain their place and centre back off the back of that clean sheet, with Spinks replacing Destiny Udogie. And look, I can understand, trying to go with a strong back line, because I think the clean sheet against Frankfurt was our first since mid-February. I can understand maybe trying to build on that and get a bit of defensive solidity moving forward. Then into the midfield, Sarr, Bentancur and Kulusevski. This will be very interesting to see how this selection plays out. Will it be Sarr and Bentancur's two holdings with Kulu as a number 10, or will Sarr be the holder with Bentancur and Kulu being tasked with getting a bit further forward? Be very interesting. But what I do think is I'd be surprised if Kulu doesn't play down the right in the midfield. That's where we usually play him when he comes on. And then in the forward line, we've got my forward line, which I'm actually excited to see. Wilson Odegaard off the right, Matisse Tell off the left, and that big Rich, the pigeon through the middle. Look, I have hope, that we can have a bit of energy tonight, a bit of directness on the ball, a bit of speed, taking on players, hopefully bring a little bit of excitement. What I would say to someone like Matisse Tell is Johnson's place is definitely up for grabs going into that semi-final. Yes, he worked his nuts off, but in possession, he wasn't the greatest at all. And that's been a huge problem with Johnson. And a lot of these big games in possession, he tends to go hiding. I would argue there's a huge opportunity for someone like Matisse Tell, because people, or Udeberg, because people forget, against AZ Alkmaar, Yeah, that's the team he played. I keep getting them mixed up with Vitesse. Eze Alkmaar, he also demonstrated the ability to be able to get in at the right place at the right time. Earlier on in the season, he was missing them, but now he's starting to put them in. So I think huge opportunity for him. Matisse Tell, again, another huge opportunity. You know, Son's out with a foot injury. There's a chance there. If he comes in, he keeps producing, he might retain his place. I think Richarlison, again, another huge opportunity. I know Dom Solanke scored, and I know to a degree Postecoglou says he wants to sort of wrap him up in cotton wool a little bit, maybe give him your jacket. But, you know, with Richarlison, I think he's hungry, and I think that might work out in our favour tonight. Midfield, again, I think, again, for Papa Matasar, a huge opportunity. I think he's become a bit of a forgotten man. You know, at one point, he was everyone's favourite player, and now people, you know, don't really rate him as much. I think there's a huge opportunity for him to be able to remind people what he can do. But look, let's go to Soren. Let's get his thoughts on the lineup. Let's get his score prediction before he goes on his annual routine of walking his dogs before the big game.
Yeah, I quite like the team. I mean, I think the only thing that I would have liked to have seen would have been Archie Gray in midfield.
Yeah.
I think you know, don't know why he's just not getting any game time at all now. I think we've missed a thing here playing him today. But look, he's gone big with the team.
No, Basuma, someone else pointed out, which I think is good. It shows that he wants to try and win this game.
Yeah, but I think Basuma on the bench. I don't even think he should be on the bench.
What's the bench?
Yeah,
so just quickly, the bench is Kinski, Ben Davies, Danzo, Archie Gray, Basuma, Bergval, Madison, Johnson, and Dom Solanke. So strong.
No,
bench.
Mikey Moore.
So someone was saying they heard on We Are Tottenham TV he's got a knock. I haven't seen that, and that's come out. But you know, I would say the boys aren't too far wrong. To be fair on that one, so that's potentially why.
I mean, I kind of do get the Basuma still being in the squad because, you know, we might need him at some point, but I don't know. I think he's another player that's gone. Yeah. He's had one or two good games, but he's been shocking. But look, I think that team is a good team. I think it's quite a strong, it is a strong team. We've kept that back four pretty much the same. Spence deserved to start. So yeah, I think Kulu will be given that free role, and probably Sarr and Bentancur sort of sitting a little bit. But I think it's a good game, a good team, and I'm going to go with kind of like my normal 3-1, but I think it's going to be a little bit more cagey. I think Forest are there for the beating, and I think it's going to be 2-1 to us.
Look, I think Forest are definitely there for the taking if we could turn up. Look, in fairness, Postecoglou has probably gone a bit stronger than what I actually anticipated he would do tonight to a certain degree. I would say, is there going to be a bit of a while? Is it going to take us a while to get into the game off the back of Europe? That's normally the way usually teams sort of struggle for the first 20, 30 minutes. It'd be interesting, maybe them changes or so that, you can try and provide a bit of energy in the first 20, 30 minutes. It'd be very interesting to see how it pans out. Because the reality is no one really knows what to expect tonight. I've been looking at Twitter all day and in group chats and stuff like that. And, it's some people are going, look, I really don't care. I just care about the Europa League. Some people are saying, I'm struggling to get up for it today. There's nothing left to play for. And you've got others are going, look, how fucking dare you? We got to try and win every game of football. So the reality is no one actually knows what to expect today. So it'll be interesting. Big up, Soren. Really appreciate your time. As always, my man, you're a fantastic panelist. You bring great conversation. What I like about you as well, you don't go with the narrative. You have your own opinions, and I absolutely love that, my man. Stevie, on to you, brother. What's your thoughts on the lineup, and what's your score prediction?
I actually think this is a fairly strong starting 11. Now, though, it's pretty close to my starting 11. I thought we'd see Solanke start just for prosperity purposes, coming off his goal performance last Thursday. I thought there might be some continuation of that. But that being said, I actually had Jed Spence in for Pedro Porro. In a match like this, where you kind of understand exactly how Forest is going to attack, you probably wanted the defensive solidity of Jed Spence versus Pedro Porro. And that continuation of Destiny Udogie and Van de Ven off that left side. But that being said, Kulusevski and Sarr, I had those in my lineup as well too. Two changes in the midfield. I figured we'd see Betancourt start this match. And the forward line is actually about as strong as you're going to make it with Matisse Tell and Wilson Odobert. I just felt like Odegaard gives you far more attacking prowess than what Brendan Johnson's going to be able to give you. And that being said, I also think his movement is far better as well too. He does exactly what Ange Postecoglou wants for a winger. So it's nice to see him back in this one. As far as my prediction goes, I'm gonna stay consistent until we see our attack just get a little bit more confidence. I'm gonna stick with the 1-1 draw.
Okay. Look, do you know what? A draw wouldn't be the worst result in the world. Don't get me wrong. I prefer it to win, but as long as we just don't come out and make a dick of ourselves like we did against Wolves last week.
For as good as for a good and solid as compacted as we were defensively in Frankfurt, there is just still a lot of work to be done in the attack moving forward, especially on the counterattack when we do win the ball back. It's just, I don't know, man. I just until we actually see the true Ange ball make an appearance, it's like you're wondering whether or not this team is capable of putting three pass for us. So yeah.
Yeah, no, look, it'd be interesting. Guys, please get over and check out Stateside Footy 27 as well. Steve's channel. He's doing content there. I think he's done a watch along for his Seattle Sounders there last night or the night before. Was that I think you had the Xbox sponsorship jersey on.
Yeah. I had the old Sounders third from, I think it was 2013, 14. But yeah, it's Sounder MLS live stream always on Saturday nights, and I'll just say, roll on Columbia, roll on.
Now, there you are, guys. Make sure you get over and check out Stateside Footy. Jack also put Dermot's link in the chat there as well. So make sure you get across and check out Dermot's channel as well. But look, I can take that down now and reveal my face, take this off so everyone can see my gorgeous face. My skin is improving. My skincare is getting better. But look, guys, I want to say a massive thank you to all you guys at home. Really do appreciate your support. Thursday night and again today, it's clear that again, I don't think the support can be questioned, from inside the club. We're here once again, even though there's nothing really left to play for in the Premier League, and we're still hoping Tottenham turn up to win. So massive thank you to you guys at home. We'll be back here in about half an hour's time for the watch along, which I'm absolutely buzzing for. This is what I love. I just love sitting here watching Tottenham Hotspur play. Hopefully we come out the right side. And I want to say a massive thank you to the panel as well today, to Soren. Absolutely, like I said, really enjoy his contributions, and he makes himself available for every single one, that's in the evening time. So massive credit to Soren. I think everyone will agree Stevie's been a wonderful addition as well. So massive thank you to Stevie. We always love Dermot on as well. Dermot gets us up when we're in our darkest hour. So big up, Dermot. Maybe he should be sponsored by what's them blue pills, Viagra, something like that. For Dermot, gets you up in your darkest hour. That's his tagline. And then also, I want to say a massive thank you to people who's gone the extra mile today. I want to say a massive thank you to Dermot's new channel, the slight change in it there. Woodsy as well, El Dante, Faz Radfar, and also Mr. Field as well. Really appreciate the support, guys. Very, very kind. And then there was one question I want to get to. I just want to be fair to it 1 second before we end off. Shem Tam says, do you think Ange will have the team to go back to his gung-ho chaotic style with open spaces again, or stick with the way we played in Germany? Look, to be fair, I think you look at I think it was a game of two halves in Germany. Don't get me wrong, the early exchanges, we sort of did boycott playing out from the back and go long because we knew they were going to try and press us and use that atmosphere. And to a degree, I think we startled them, or, to a little bit. I think it took them a while to maybe find out the answers to it. But then, for large parts of that half, we got the press on them. We forced them to go along. And whether people like to admit or not, we defended on the halfway line. The difference is Romero and Van de Ven mop it up compared to what other players were doing. They've mop it up very, very well. Second half, I take it. We sat back, sat 11 men behind the ball. Maybe is that what you're alluding to? Maybe. I think today might be a bit different if we know Nuno the way we do. He's a pragmatist. And I think, he'll probably look to sit back, hit us on the counter, look to get Elanga over the top, Hudson over the top, Chris Wood. But I'd be very surprised if they're set up to come and press us, which means then we can afford to play out from the back, sit on the halfway line. It's just about how do we defend that counter? How do we stop that counter? I think that's the way it's going to go. I could be proven wrong, but half an hour's time will tell. Same time. So let's get there. Guys, go and get your drinks. Go and get your dinner. We'll see you back here in half an hour's time for the watch along. And as fucking always, my European semi-finalist, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
And as Son
Spoil Nuno's party.
As Sonam would say, come on, you Spurs.
Thank
Big
you,
up,
Son.
man.
I'm very, very kind. Come on, you Spurs. See you all in the watch along, everybody. Let's
y'all very
spoil
soon.
Nuno's party.
Let's fucking go.